Have so many people here today. My name is Michelle Playest, and I'm the Senior Change Manager for the LMS project. And I will be co-facilitating this session with my colleague Lachlan Kalash, who is the Learning Innovation Lead from the Division of Learning and Teaching. Also on the call, we have Amy Martin, who is the Training Lead from the project, Vince Rapace, who is the Project Manager, Mark Bryant, who is the Project Director, and I am certainly hoping in amongst these faces we have Janelle Wheat, who has also joined us briefly, who, apart from her role obviously as PVC Learning and Teaching, is also our project sponsor. So I am going to stop sharing momentarily, and I'm hoping Janelle is on the call. She is. Terrific, and I'll ask Janelle just to say a few words.
Thank you. A well-oiled machine, I think, because you have got it set up, Lachlan, perfectly for a really productive meeting. Hi, everyone. I'm only going to say a very quick few things. Just firstly, thank you, a genuine thank you for your engagement as early adopters for our new LMS. You are the people who are going to help us land this in a really seamless and hopefully least painful way. It is a big change to how we are going to be engaging with our learning, with our students. It's exciting. Brightspace is fantastic as a platform, and we won't know ourselves, to be honest, once we get our heads around engaging in this space. So from me, a genuine heartfelt thank you for taking the time to be the people who engage early. It is fantastic. You will make this a more seamless transition. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and I hope you have fun playing in the sandbox and really getting to know the system. So I will leave you to it. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Lachlan.
Terrific. Thanks, Janelle. Okay. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. I guess we are clearly a very large group here today, and we have a mixture of people, professional staff, academics, people who have been involved with the project, have had no exposure to the project. So just please be conscious of that, because we are quite a large group. We'll ask you to post your questions, any questions that you have, in the Q&A function on Zoom. And we'll have a couple of the project team in the background answering questions where they can. We'll pause throughout the presentation as well and ask Amy if there are any questions that should be brought to the discussion. We'll get through as many questions as we can today, but obviously we do have limited time. So if there are questions that we can't get through today, or if there's something quite specific to your area, then we'll certainly follow up with you after the session just to make sure that we cover off anything outstanding. So our agenda is a very simple one today. So I'll spend a little bit of time just talking about the context, particularly for those people who haven't been involved with the project, of what we're doing here today and what's happening in the broader project. And then I'll be passing to Lachlan to cover off some of the features and have a look at the system, how to get help, and then we'll just do a bit of a wrap up to finalise. So most of you hopefully have seen this this chart, but for those who haven't, and probably most importantly to preface this, is the early access and the system as it is right now, Brightspace, is a work in progress. So the project is working on configuring the system, starting to get data migrated across from Blackboard into Brightspace. So what you'll be going into is a very work in progress environment. So the purpose of this is really to give you an opportunity to start playing with Brightspace, starting to become familiar with the layout and some of the functionality. There has been a little bit of, I guess, misconception that this may give people access to migrating their subject earlier or inclusion in Go Live. This is not related to that at all, and we're happy to field questions a bit more on that further into the session if need be. But just to be clear, this is just an opportunity to start playing with the system. Your access will be based on an instructor role with limited access based on what's currently available in the environment. But it will include things like adding content and being able to see a learner view, and Lachlan will talk about that a bit more. But it is by no means a final system with roles and permissions and terminology. A lot of these things are still being refined, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. The functionality is beta functionality and configuration, excuse me. So that's continuing to be updated and refined. So as you're in the system over the next month or so, you will likely see changes as we go. But just to bear in mind, when you do start looking at it, it's not the full set of functionality or the final language and navigation and configuration. You will have access to start playing with navigation, content creation, and some of the initial content templates for the university. Things like gradebook, external tools with LTI integrations and assessment tools. These are very much a work in progress, so they won't be in the system at the moment. They'll be coming online in the coming months. From a learning and support perspective, and I know we'll talk about training. I'll talk about training in a minute. This is not training, so we just need to be really clear what we're providing today and what you'll be accessing over the next month or so is just basic orientation and overview. We are following up with detailed training and learning and support activities, which you will most certainly have access to for those who would like it. In the environment, you will get access to a sandbox and some sample data, which Lachlan will talk to, but you won't be looking at migrated content or access to your subject at this stage. So in terms of the broader activities from the change management perspective, we've had a lot of activity around stakeholder engagement, which we have stakeholder groups, so the steering committee, the CRG stakeholder groups, working groups. So some of you on the call I know are involved in those. Hopefully a lot of you were able to attend either a roadshow or drop-in sessions that Mike Bryant conducted over the last couple of months. We have another one this week in Canberra and doing another one in Goulburn fairly soon. So that has been a really good opportunity to engage with staff. And we're also looking for ongoing opportunities to tap into existing forums like edX and other forums that are happening in the course of the next 12 months. From communications perspective, this is not telling you a lot at the moment, other than to, I guess the shading is to suggest there will obviously be a lot more communication as we get closer to going live with the system. And also, I guess, to reinforce the fact that we'll ensure that leaders and managers and support, anyone in support roles, admin roles, those sorts of things, are getting information ahead of the broader audience groups, just to make sure that you are ahead of the curve. The learning and support I'll come back to in a minute in the next slide. But just to reiterate, we have a small group going live in February, expected to go live in February next year. And then for the majority of you, the teaching will actually start, will be available from July next year. So just to focus in on this and to reiterate, so we've already commenced some teaching admin training and are continuing to do that over the next month to 6 weeks. As I said, we've got that early adopter access starting from now, which is very exciting. And then as we migrate content and as the system is in a state that it's ready to start doing more formal training, then we'll be making learning and support activities available to subject conveners and to any other staff who need access, from starting with basic pilots early on and then into more detail as we get into October and November. So I guess the important thing to note here again is to reiterate that as early adopters, you will have access to that training. And we're also noting that obviously some people will be going in at different times to review their subjects or set them up. and also then when they commence teaching. So we're cognizant of the fact that we need to make sure that we make learning and support available to staff, not just at a single point in time, but for at various times throughout the project life cycle. So, so that is primarily what I had to cover. Amy, just a question to you, if there's anything that I needed in the chat to...
Nope, all good. Thanks, Michelle.
Good, terrific. All right. Well, without further ado, I will pass to Lachlan to get us into Brightspace, starting to have a look.
Thanks, Michelle. And good morning, everybody. I'll just get myself a little bit organized over here. I think it's safe to say that we can expect to see a fair bit of each other over the next 12 months in terms of training and other sessions. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. And we'll start having a look at the Brightspace environment. Okay, so let's share the screen. Okay, can everybody see my Brightspace desktop? Okay. For those of you looking at the slide deck as well that I put into the chat before, I'm basically kicking off around about slide 9 at this point. So we're going to talk a little bit about accessing this system. So as Michelle pointed out, you've been added to the Brightspace environment or are in the process of being added in for a few people, but effectively that's going to involve two things. One of them is you'll have access to a sandbox environment to do all the playing and exploring you'd like to do. And the other part of that is that you're going to be able to see samples of what migrated content looks like for students in that environment. So look, the most important part really is the base address in the new environment. And it's a pretty simple one, learn.csu.edu.au. You don't have to worry about the other stuff at the back there. It'll auto-populate, but basically learn.csu. I've suggested, I think, in the slide deck that you bookmark that page. You are going to be using it non-stop. So by all means, star it, bookmark it, highlight it, whatever it is that you're doing on your browser. It'll bring you to this page. Your logins have been set up with single sign-on, so you'll be using the SSO button up the top here rather than trying to put in username details here. That's going to prompt you for your CSU credentials. Pop those in. And that will bring us in to our landing page within the Brightspace system. Now, before I start digging in here, I've also pointed out on that slide that it would be a really great idea if you also took the opportunity as quickly as possible to join the Brightspace community site, which is at community.desiretololearn. If you head there and sign up for that. And the process is pretty much instantaneous. Register with your email address, confirm the email, and then you'll have access to a vast array of self-help resources, FAQs, and the ability to access kind of a think tank of other users around the world that you can put questions to or see if they've got the same sorts of scenarios happening. Because in this space, it's guaranteed that pretty much someone has had the same problems that we may have beforehand, and we can access that that group. And we will come back to talking about another aspect of the Brightspace community page, which is a bunch of self-help modules under the guided training, which, to be honest, is a really solid starting point for people to get their head around what this environment looks like. And I'd highly recommend it because what we look at, as Michelle mentioned, within our own environment is evolving daily at the moment. It's in a highly iterative state. The integrations, the tools that we use, the third-party tools like Zoom and Panopto and Turnitin and all the others, all of those configurations along with the Grade Center and other parts of the tool set are being developed, decisions still being made about how they're going to work in practice. all that sort of stuff happening. So that's another reason why accessing those self-help modules to have a look at the functionality, getting a better general idea of what Brightspace can potentially do is not a bad idea to supplement your own playing inside this environment. Now, I will stop periodically as well to check to see if anyone's got any questions, etc. But as Michelle pointed out at the start, questions in the Q&A, or you can put comments in the chat, etc. as we go, and we will stop at different points in time to have a look at those. All right, so what we're looking at the moment is our landing page in Brightspace. Another term for that being dashboard. One of the big differences that I notice is that we have the term dashboard is used in different ways in Brightspace. We have our landing page, so our dashboard for the entire system, which will show us all of the subjects, courses, etc. that you're enrolled into. And you'll start to see that straight away under My Subjects. What you're going to see initially, I suspect, is your sandbox once you log into this system. Later on, at some point in the next fortnight, you're also going to be able to see this sample subject, which is a podiatry subject. And I'm sure that you've heard some of the conversations happening to date around master subjects and session-based subjects. And it is worth noting the coding that appears underneath each of these. When you see the word M, for example, this is a master subject. So what that means is that it's not what the students are going to see when it's rolled out. They're going to see an S at the front when they go in there. So it's little things like that that you're going to start to see as you get familiar with this environment. And I'm going to show you what that subject looks like, because it's going to give you some insight into the migration process for what content looks like as that starts to come across from Blackboard and then gets configured in different ways. The other thing that we start seeing, obviously there are huge differences in what this interface looks like, where our menus are located, what the navigation looks like. And again, I'll reiterate the fact that this is evolving and changing. So the way that these items are ordered, the number of items that are up the top here, whether some things are here that shouldn't be and other things that aren't here aren't there yet, all of it is still in train. So don't get wedded to any part of that really, but you need to get used to the idea that your menus and navigation, etc., are located obviously in different places. I'll point out a couple of, I suppose, tips along the way that might help. Probably the first one to remember is that the CSU icon is always going to bring you back to your course landing page. Okay, so your dashboard, if you ever get lost and you want to come back to that, just click on the logo, it'll bring you back to your main dashboard. You're going to see a collection of items across the top here that provide updates. Any change to the system, for example, when content is added, will be doorbelled, so to speak, if you see it next to the bell here, and that'll show you when adjustments have been made to any of your subject sites. There is a communications tool to do with subscriptions up the top here. I'm not going to dwell too much on that today. If you're curious about the communication tool set, have a look at those self-help modules. There's a chapter all about the communication tools. I'm not going to talk about it today because how those tools are being used for etc. is still being refined in the system. You'll also find that there's an ability to jump between your subjects or courses, as it's called here, through the squares that we have at the top. Clicking on your user profile at the top here gives you options to work on your profile settings, your notification settings, etc. But this one is one that you're going to get used to, view as learner. And this is effectively the same as a student view that you're probably used to in Blackboard, which means that when you jump in as a learner, you're going to see that the view for students within Brightspace is significantly different to what the instructor sees. So that's another difference between what we're used to in I2, where they were pretty much the same unless we'd hidden things. In Brightspace, the look is quite different. Amy?
Hi, Lachlan. Just had a question here for us. Is there a browser capability alignment?
Browser capability alignment.
Will it work better in some than others?
Okay, that one I can answer. Brightspace themselves recommend Chrome as your main protocol. So that's similar to where Blackboard is at these days. It does support all modern browsers apparently, but Brightspace recommends that you use Chrome as your first protocol.
And the other question that we had in chat
Mhm.
was from Nerida. Should we be encouraging all members of our discipline team to access the community learning site, or is it just recommended for early users at this point?
I have a view on this, which basically is I don't see any harm at all in people accessing a public website that has self-help training resources and videos, etc., for people to watch. I can't see it being harmful in any way. That's my take on it. Someone else may wade into the chat or other places, but that's my take on it.
Thank you.
Okay. The other thing I want to point out before I start digging around in here a little bit more is that you're going to be seeing less in the way of settings and tweaking of back-end system type settings than you're used to in Blackboard. You're going to need to get used to that because the way that roles, etc., are being defined with what we can access as teachers, what students can access, what we can see, and higher level admin settings is having a lot more attention in this new environment than kind of, I guess, in some ways, Blackboard was a bit of a free-for-all. So that's something to be aware of, is that you may not have the same level of transparency around all those types of settings, but you'll get used to that. We did have a question about seeing the student view, and I'll show you that once we start getting into some of these individual subjects. The other part about Brightspace, in each of the dashboards, you're going to see a collection of widgets and tools on that landing page that, again, we're not used to seeing in Blackboard. Some of them are to do with things like your announcements that you have going on in any of your subjects. You're going to get a top-down view of all of those announcements from the landing page. Same for your students. So that'll be across all subjects. If there are announcements, they will be captured or visible through a widget on your landing page. You're able to customize a lot of those widgets to some degree, but these are kind of where they're sitting at the moment. And you can also go into that announcement tool directly from that point. Again, part of the communication tool set, we're not really dwelling on it today, but all I can say is that once you get in here, start clicking on things and having a look at how they function. And you'll also notice that there is a much greater focus in this environment around calendars. It has an integrated calendar, which means that any of our assessment tasks, when we build them, link up to that integrated calendar. It means that people will be getting notifications and seeing things coming a lot more clearly in advance than what we had with Blackboard, because really people needed to be looking explicitly at the subject outline or going into an assessment folder to get details around assessment. They're going to get it from the moment they get into the LMS in this new environment. It's much more integrated. All right, there is also a particular tool inside Brightspace called the Learning Object Repository, which effectively is a content collection tool. And part of the training that we start doing together in the next couple of months, really, we'll have a look at some of that functionality of how it works and why it will change the way your content looks when we get into the subject sites. So I'm going to start digging into each of these individual subjects, if I may, but I just wanted to dwell on the fact that your landing page, when you come in, is a lot more interactive and connected to your subjects than what it previously was within Blackboard, where you could access things like calculators and note sections and what have you. All right, let's have a look at the Sandbox environment. So I'm added into this environment and I have a second dashboard. So when I come into subject site as an instructor, and the best way to check what role you're in is to click on your name here. If it's got an option to switch across to learner, that tells me that I'm actually in here as a teacher at the moment. But I have the same widgets that I was seeing in the landing page for the whole environment, but these are obviously specific to this subject, or Sandbox in this case. So I've got the calendar tool happening. I've also got an activity feed, which allows you to add posts on the landing page for students. So for those of you that were utilizing your landing page and your subject site to add updates for students, activities, etc., you'll be able to start utilizing an activity feed on the landing page, which is actually a pretty engaging first up for your students. And we'll certainly have a look at that once we start commencing training. Brightspace also has a content widget tool, which basically starts breaking down the materials that you create into sections and then organizes them in thumbnails that will show you how much of that content has been completed. So to give you some idea of what that looks like for a student, for example, that podiatry subject that we were looking at organizes its landing page for a student. And we'll see up here that I'm looking at this from the student view. It has a thumbnail for each of the content items that people can jump to through that widget, or you could collapse the widget if you wanted to, if you don't like the view, but that's up to the individual user to configure. And really what we're going to be looking at today is content creation, which is the main reason this tool set has been made available, so people can get into this environment in your sandboxes and start playing with content creation tools. Now, I noticed that a few things have been happening in the chat. So Amy, shall I stop there for a second?
No, we're on
top
of
of
that. The last one was from Bob, if you'd like to answer that one. Are the announcements also emailed to students?
Comes down to your notifications, but by default, yes, they'll go through to the email address on the end. Yep. Okay, so what we're looking at the moment in our sandbox is I've gone into the content tab. I have no content in here at the moment. And really within this environment, and if we're looking at the slide deck, I'm looking kind of around the slide 12 part. But effectively, I'm just going to start clicking in here to show you what this looks like. When it says new unit here, we're talking about a top level folder. So I can create that. Maybe we want to give it a title like Module 1, for example. I'm just going to put in a few terms here just for reference. Every item that you put into Brightspace has the ability to configure availability dates. And you can even put due dates against them, but keeping in mind, these are not assessment items. So that will simply sync up with the calendar and start giving people reminders about when they're meant to be doing things. So as distinct from an actual assessment item. In every one of the building objects within Brightspace, you're going to see this Wysiwyg. So basically the editing tool that you'll be getting really, really familiar with over time, but it is quite comprehensive. So apart from your base formatting, you're going to see some objects in here like this insert stuff button, which is to do with other types of media. So third-party media tools like YouTube, etc. You're also able to add in video and audio, for example, directly from your device, which will go into the content. So you don't have to go into another tool like Panopto or something else to add video or audio content. You can literally build them within the editor and decide whether it's just audio or whether or not you're accessing your webcam, for example. You'll also notice within there that you can upload files. You can access things from your local subject content collection, or if you've been utilizing the learning repository, you'll be able to get content from there. And I can see a question in there about templates. Very good point, Sue. I will get to templates right now. Another object that you're going to be accessing in here is templates. Now, the templates you will find when we actually build blank pages. So I'll get out of making this folder for a moment. If I save and close, and before I do that, I'll just point out that every object that you build in here starts by default as hidden. That's a system setting. So whether or not you want to make it visible to students or not is on you. That can be toggled in a number of different ways, but by default, that's hidden. So I've made a folder. Now within that folder, I've got the option over here to add objects, either things I've made before I can reuse, or I can make a new object in there. And the one we're talking about at the moment is a document, a new HTML document. This would be the one that you're overwhelmingly using to add in new content pages in Brightspace. And what we can see here immediately above the right-hand corner of the Wysiwyg is the option to insert templates. Now, the templates that are in this library for you to access at the moment, 3 different ones. There's a blank template, which looks like this. Add in a title, put in your content, and those fonts, etc., have been preset for you to be able to start typing within the formats that will make your content look consistent and obviously display evenly throughout for the student users, etc. If we have a look at the other template types that are in there, I can go over the top of the existing one and we'll see that we've got a topic template in there for an overview. It's got sample text in there. So you can start populating that. And the other one that we have in there is an activity template, which is at the moment just has the instruction, etc. So it's not getting into embedded media as such. But if you are using other tools to create interactive objects like H5P, for those of you that dabble in that space, you can certainly put that into your new blank pages for etc. There is a source code page that allows you to paste in that content. For those of you that were doing that in i2, I know a lot of users have gotten used to the option of dropping in third-party interactive content. But Brightspace also has a really easy to use and access feature called Elements. If we click on this plus here, and you'll find, if we go down to Element, there are a whole lot of interactive objects within Brightspace already for you to use to help you organize your content. So for those of you that were using things like accordions or wanting their content to be organized in different interactive ways, the ability to add interactives into your content has never been easier in this environment. You don't have to go into another tool like H5P. You can certainly utilize some of the tools that are available within the native LMS environment. So that's pretty neat in that you don't have to literally be logging jobs at that point to organize your content in different ways. Now that you've got access to your sandbox, you can go in there and start having a play with those different types of tools within the Wysiwyg, whether it's dropping in links, images, interactive objects. That's again listed under elements if you want to create your own interactives. But basically what we're really encouraging people to do as part of this process is to get in here and start playing with this tool set, using the templates. There'll be more templates added in, I would expect, every week, every couple of weeks, there'll be different ones added in. That's just being developed as we speak, but you've got 3 to play with to begin with.
And we have some questions on the templates too, Lachlan, that might.
Yep. Excellent. Throw them at me. What do we got?
Okay, no worries. So can you generate your own standardized templates to increase efficiency? These elements look great.
I'm probably going to park that one for the moment and say it's probably one of those design decisions that's still being worked through at the moment. The functionality for the templates, etc., is really to help with migration at the moment with all the content coming from i2. And so they're coming up with uniform templates for people to be able to utilize on their content in the Sandpit environment. You can certainly create a template for your content within Brightspace. Okay, that can certainly be done. But at the moment, I don't know what where that's going to go in terms of being made available to everybody.
Okay, the next one, would we need to replace H5P content in our current i2 sites using this method?
That's a really great question. In the first instance, no, you don't have to. You can reuse them. You'll be able to grab the embed code from over there and use it over here. And whether that's done in tandem with one of the design team, for example, as part of your customization, or it's something that you yourself are comfortable to do or have access to, you can absolutely do it and drop that in the same way. I would probably look at how each of those embedded interactives look compared to each other and make a decision around which one you think looks better. But certainly the ability to create them and use them is at your fingertips now without needing to use a third-party tool. H5P certainly has a lot more options for interactive objects, but this tool set is 2 clicks for you to drop in that sort of tool into your content. So it's really quite powerful.
And one of the questions, so we create a folder for each topic and then add the different templates like content items in i2. Is that correct?
That's a really good question. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to save this item. And
sorry, I'm trying to put them in order of what you're currently talking about.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. I don't think there's a set formality for today, and I know we're not going to get to everything that people have questions around, and that's what we're going to have, all of our training and things around as well. But basically, what we're looking at is that you have top-level folders, which are called units over here. They use the word unit. You can create top-level folders. Inside those folders, you can also create subfolders, and they have the term here, lesson. Now, at this point, whether it's called a lesson or whether it's called a subfolder, I don't care. But basically, at this point, if I call that a subfolder, I can then drag that and reorganize my content within here, and then have my individual items sitting inside, nested inside subfolders as well. So you can certainly add each of those pages or items within multiple levels of folders. But what I want to really contrast that to is that once you get added to that podiatry subject, this is where you're going to be able to see what the content looks like to students at the other end. So you get both ends of the continuum. So if I open up that content here, and I'm going to switch to the learner view because that's what you're going to be looking at as students. Open up the content. And what we get here is a launch pad of sorts for the students that has almost a contents type page of all of the items that have been created and made visible. We have a summary over here of how many of those have been worked through or viewed. And we have the ability to be able to open that up and then launch either individual items or open the whole folder. And here we have ultimately what the student view looks like with the content organized in obviously a mobile friendly way. It's very clear this has had some templating applied to this content. So if you're curious about what the migration process is going to end up doing to the content, you're going to be able to see what that looks like. And it is a work in progress, but some of the items within the podiatry subject, for example, particularly at the beginning, you'll see what that migration process has done in terms of fonts and banners and templates, etc. And the other thing that I really love, for those of us that have gotten really wedded to the idea of having a menu along the side to help navigate our content, is that Brightspace also has a within content nav that allows the students to jump to individual items as well. So this is kind of my comfort zone coming from Blackboard, seeing that nav along the side that allows me to jump between different objects, but we absolutely can open that up and then jump to individual pieces if we need to. So really, I think probably the best way is for you to experience this yourself once you get enrolled into the podiatry subject, but it is definitely worth keeping in mind that there is a very big difference between the instructor view and what that content looks like as you start populating objects in here, because the students don't see this tree. They don't see the way that the content is put together with these different panes, etc., and organized. They get this end view, right? So it's definitely worth moving between the view as learner and view as instructor options so that you can see how that content that you're putting in there is going to eventuate. Amy, I'll stop there for a second.
Yeah, one question that might be best answered live here. Do these subfolders then impact the way students see and negotiate learning content? And it's not just about the back-end organization.
Yeah, if they've got headings, for example, what that means is that they're going to be another click that the student works through. It's a really good question. But basically what we see here is if there are top-level folders within the nav, it's got two objects within it, and they only see the objects that are within once you launch what they call a unit, for example. So they don't see those when you have this launching of particular content. But if we actually, let's have a look at something with a bit more in it. Right, when you use this content tool to launch it, it asks basically for you to select which one of these you're going to work through and then launch it as such. It doesn't just have all of them in a row. You're dealing with the content organized into these clusters. So it's a really good question. It's certainly the student experience starts working through those individual items. I'm going to turn my menu back on. And you can see that the folder itself and the titling of it, there's no description in there at the moment, but they would see descriptive text underneath.
Sorry, didn't realize my microphone was off when I started coughing then. But we can also add release conditions to when students can see content.
100%. That's a really good point again. Another one of the things that you play around with when you create new content items, make a new document, there are release conditions not authorized. Well, that's because I'm a learner. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, back into my sandbox, into my content. Let's add in a new object. And you've got at that point visibility settings. Essentially, not only can you toggle the visibility, but you can also set dates, but you can also set release conditions as well. Now, release conditions can be as simple as meeting particular date points, but they can also be a lot more complex than that. I'm not going to start talking about the intelligent agent feature within Brightspace, but when you start working through the training materials, etc., or the self-guided tutorials, it's a term you're going to see mentioned a lot, but effectively it has some comparisons with the adaptive release features that we had in Blackboard, but is quite it's a more powerful version of that. And you can set a lot of different release conditions for students to have to meet to be able to see different types of content. Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. It was certainly something that was talked about a lot before I had looked at Brightspace. So you can find out more about the intelligent agents functionality within the tutorials. We're certainly not looking at it today, though, I promise. Okay. Let's just bring myself back to my slide deck and see if there are things that I wanted to talk about that I haven't. Availability, release conditions, due dates against each of the objects we create, being able to toggle visibility for all of your objects from this nav, as well as when you create them. You can certainly toggle them on here as well. You do have the ability to download any of the objects that you create as web pages, HTML items that you can look at, but you can also print them as well. Let's see. If you create an item like this page that we looked at, so we've got a blank page here, we used an activity template. If I wanted to take that item and make it visible to students from the get-go as part of my homepage, you can actually publish those items from here. So if I click on that, this is actually quite neat because it adds more of that landing page interaction type element, and I can put a message next to it. This week we have this amazing blank document for you, and I can post that. And what I get then for the learners on the landing page, if we go back, here's a breadcrumb for you to take you back to your subject level landing page rather than the whole Brightspace landing page. And what we see down here underneath our activity feed is we've got that object posted directly to the students, and that comes up. They'll get notifications around those as well. So you can take each of the individual content items you make and put it right in your students' faces effectively as you make it, if that's something that you would like to play with as well. We talked about the nav bar that students can toggle on and off for their content. What else have we got going on? All right. Look, at this point, I'm looking at slide 14 in the deck for those of you that have that. We've got a few activities that we suggest that you might want to have a look at. Maybe I'll bring that over. Now, this is just where I've started, but some things that you might want to consider because they helped me. The focus of this activity and your access at this point in time is getting familiar and comfortable in this environment. Not wedded to particular, I suppose, parts of the navigation because it's being customized, it's being changed. But really getting familiar with the way that the content is laid out, that the tool set, particularly the content building tool set is utilized. Focus on getting familiar. Also, one way of doing that, for example, is looking at the way that we go about building content within Blackboard and have a look at a like for like with how that's done within Brightspace. So for me, for example, I wrote a list that had the way that I would build kind of folder level content and how I was laying my content out and what that was called even, because the terminology is different in this new environment. We already had unit and lesson used, which we certainly weren't using in this way beforehand. So hence sometimes coming up with a like for like list to help you get familiar with what they look like. And also your processes for how you would get that type of content created in Blackboard against Brightspace is also worth looking at, particularly with multimedia and interactives. It's a different process. It looks different. So that can be quite helpful. We want you to explore as much as you can click on. There is nothing that you can break with the access that you've been given at this point. Your sandbox is your kingdom to do as you will in that environment. Do play with the templates, using content templates, and the premise that people will be utilizing those for different types of activity, for standard content, for organizing structure within their modules, is an assumption that we have moving forward, that people will want to be able to utilize those, with the caveat that some people, I guess, if they're going to build their own templates, etc., and go to that length, will also be doing that. Have a crack within your sandbox of putting together a sample structure, for example, a week of learning and what that might look like, switching between the learner view and the creator view to get a look of what that experience is going to look like. I'm going to add to that, log in to this on your phone. Have a look at what the mobile experience looks like for Brightspace once you've added your content in, because it is really clean, very nice, and looks a lot better than what the mobile experience looks like for students in Blackboard. It's worth looking at and keeping that in mind, because this environment is designed with mobile in mind up front. So there's a change there. Do sign up to the Brightspace community that we mentioned before, and that will give you the opportunity to work through some of those guided tutorials that I was talking about before. If I can bring that up briefly, the guided training that's in there. Effectively, you can go through this at your own pace, look at it not at all, or you can certainly just go to particular sections. But what you might find once you go into it is, if you're interested in the communication tool set, you can play with those. If you want to look at publishing of content and its features, there are a whole bunch of topics that you can work through there. This is that content widget that I was talking about on the landing page. They're using Brightspace to organize their training on Brightspace. That's the best way that you can get familiar, is having learning situated within the same tool set. All right, look, I am conscious of time. So Amy, I'll throw back to you and see if we've got any urgent outstanding questions. But fairly shortly, I'm going to be throwing back to Michelle to close things out.
No worries. So this one here from Nicole: is there an ability for submissions for the assessment tabs items within the sandbox? Is there an ability? Sorry, let me reset. I think I put the emphasis on the wrong thing.
I think I know what Nicole might be getting at. The answer is yes at the moment, but don't get wedded to it, because the way that the Grade Center and the Gradebook and the assessment submission tool works is effectively, it's evolving at the moment. So I feel like, yep, you're going to be able to create those items if you're curious to have a look at them. But that functionality, because it's being configured at the moment and it connects to other integrations like the subject outline tool, like Turnitin, like other objects, its visibility and availability over the next couple of weeks at the very least is compromised. So it could be there. Have a play, see if it's there. As I said, you can't break it, but you may have to wait a couple of weeks to get access to that in full.
Can't break
Others,
it.
Amy? Yep.
If you can't break it, then you're not trying hard enough.
Right.
There's lots and lots of hype in the chat here. Sorry to be the hype man. For the Pulse app, which is the Brightspace app. Now, we didn't push that one, but everyone seemed to have found it anyway. So, yeah. Did you have any thoughts or feelings on that one?
Oh, it's great. I love it. No, it is very good to get hold of, but you can also access it through a browser on your phone, and it's equally good. The HTML5 work on this is pretty seamless as well.
Ree's asking if there's a tour. In Moodle, they have a user tour where pop-ups come up for students to let them know different areas of the platform. Is there something similar in Brightspace? At this point in our system, that doesn't actually exist yet, Ree, but it is something that we've talked about.
Not at this point. Yeah, I guess we add it to the list of things to look at. Yep.
Yeah, as that optional training sort of that we're talking about injecting in there for students.
Okay, the last bit that I need to talk about at this point is that at this stage, the types of help and support are available, are organized. You'll see them on slide 16 if you've got the PowerPoint deck there, but essentially, Michelle will talk about the fact that and Janelle mentioned, we do want your feedback, we want your involvement, We want all of that, and the way that you can get involved, etc., and provide that is through the Polaris email address, and that will then get triaged through to the various teams, whether it's the change management team that we're on, or the design teams, the building teams, etc. You have a mechanism for providing that feedback. If you're looking for tech support, you're going to need to log a shareware request. There's a link to that there. Updates around the project are provided through the DLT LMS website, which is right there. Also added into that page, you'll find that there's actually a playlist, a YouTube playlist that's being added to as well. So as we have training materials and clips and other videos, they'll all be accessible from that one website. And lastly, I'll give another plug to the Brightspace community website, because it is your best one-stop shop at this point in time. Okay, look, I think at that point, I'm happy to answer other questions, etc. later, but I want to hand back to Michelle. So thank you all for putting up with me ranting and having a bit of a wander through this environment. I'll stop sharing, and I guess I'll be seeing a whole lot more of you all over the next 12 months.
Thanks, Lachlan. Actually, if you can just put that last slide up, that would be great. Look, thank you, everyone, and thank you to Lachlan. That was terrific. I'm fairly new to the project, so I found it very, very informative. I hope you all did too. Look, just in closing, and please, if you have any last-minute questions, please do add them to the Q&A chat. We've been using this language explore. We really ask that you enter the early adopter phase with a pioneering spirit, and mindful that it is, as we've stressed, a work in progress. We do invite and actually really ask you to provide feedback on Brightspace broadly, but also your experience as you start to learn how the system works and get familiar with the layout, because that will help us inform what we design for the learning and support rollout for the broader community. So any areas that you felt were a little difficult to grasp, or perhaps some of the materials that are available through the Brightspace community, if there was some that you found really helpful, not so, any of that sort of feedback is incredibly useful to us. And perhaps most importantly, and I saw with great delight a lot of really positive comments being made, and smiley emojis and so forth. One of the things that is really important as we move forward, and we ask for you to partner with us on this, is to help shape the discussion outside of the project. Project teams love to talk about how great what they're doing is, but it bears very little weight compared to people who are actually from within the academic community, from professional staff who are actually going in and looking and having a play. No change, no project, and certainly no system will be all things to all people. But we hope that it's overwhelmingly a positive experience for you, and we ask that you take that energy and that discussion to your colleagues to help them feel positive and excited and willing to take on this change in a positive spirit. So I don't think we have any final questions. So unless, Amy, is there anything there that we need to?
No, all looking good. Maybe just to
All right.
recap that we're going to send out an email with any, with your PowerPoint slides and stuff attached.
Yes, thank you. And I actually was remiss at the beginning. So a couple of things. We will send out an email, as Amy has said, with the various links, with a link to this recording as well, for if you would like to revisit, or certainly any of your colleagues. And also we're planning to do another session, probably along the similar lines, although less focused on a walkthrough and more focused on any questions that you have, but towards the end of September, just to pick up any additional questions or comments that you might have. So we'll have a drop-in session at that time as well. All right, well, thank you very much once again, and we look forward to working with you over the coming months. Thank you.